While sitting on top of a rail fence, I whittled out what was called a Kentucky button from my drawers. The wood was of dried oak, very hard, and in a few hours there was at least half of it driven into me. From the noise to the left, one would note that there was considerable fighting, and there was apt to be something doing soon and a general attack made by our forces. We were hunting a scrap, and from what I had seen and heard, I suppose we had found sufficient Yanks to give battle. I was not long in line before Jeff, Benjamin, and I were sent to the rear to draw Company F rations of bacon that was being issued, and the detail surely appreciated it, as we were very hungry, and it somewhat rested with the detail how they drew in the deal. We had no more got our meals stowed in our haversacks before we were ordered to fall in line. The company's bacon had not been fully issued, but the boys grabbed it up and divided it the best they could as we marched to the front. The movement to the front was fast walking, and as we all knew well what was coming from the roar to our left, there could be no mistake, so we were soon near enough in for the shells that were being thrown by the enemy's guns to make us forget bacon and hunger. I merely mention this bacon incident to show how our ill-gotten part of it went. I was soon shot down. Benjamin, shortly afterwards, was killed. Jeff, in his scrambles in crossing Bull Run, got his haversack full of water and cut it off. We went in nearly over the same ground that we had passed the previous night. We were just emerging from a piece of woods that had but little underbrush, and were well closed up and alignment good. We were closing to the left and were obliquing. I was not aware of the enemy's nearness, and I don't suppose the officers were. I thought they came from Creek Valley to near the brow of the hill when we were sighted coming in, for their country was open, and we could well be seen from the opposite side of the creek, where their reserve was stationed. So at a distance of about 150 yards, the enemy was lying down, and rose up in masses and fired one volley. I and one other member of Hood's brigade fell wounded. As I was obliquing to the left, the bullet rather cut across my bowels and made a long and ugly wound. One of the boys told me that I fell face upward and was laughing. I had always some fear of receiving a wound in the stomach, if ever I was so unfortunate as to get one, and had made a practice of wearing my cartridge box to the front when battling, and in this instance it would have protected me if I had not been obliquing. I suppose when I was struck I fainted, for the first I knew was when I raised to a sitting position, and the boys were some distance to the front, shooting and yelling at the fleeing enemy. I could see the dead Yanks, as I supposed them to be, lying thick in the battle line. They were a finely dressed set, and made a gaudy-looking corpse. I did not see the enemy when they arose and fired, as I guess at that instant I was looking to the left, as we were closing in that direction. I was feeling no pain, but felt somewhat dazed, and on looking down I saw a rent in the front of my pants. I soon had cartridge box off and pants unbuttoned as I saw the wound, and I lay on my back with the idea that I was shot in the bowels. The grape shot and shell were pouring in thick and fast in our rear, a great number falling short of the intended mark, and it made me hopeful that it would soon put an end to my existence. I turned my head to the enemy, thinking I might be so fortunate as to get a dead shot. They poured around, but none hit. I would raise my head often and see if I could discover any signs of discharge from torn intestines, but could discover none. I also had a horror of famishing, as I had heard that one often died for want of water when bleeding badly. I was trying to locate some water in the rear. The wound at the mouth was not bleeding, and never did, more than enough to stain my clothes, but internally I supposed it was. I thought possibly that it was for want of food that there was no sign of discharge, and it did not take long for all these ideas to flash through my mind. So in a short space of time, hope returned, and I thought that possibly I was not mortally wounded. Then fear was uppermost, and I crawled about 50 feet to a well-rotted stump, thinking it would protect me from shot. I was not much more than settled behind it when the idea struck me that a grape could go through, so I dragged myself to a good-sized tree about 100 feet off and stayed there some time in a reclining position, with head and shoulders resting against the tree. My pants and drawers were open and well off the wound. I saw quite a number of the finely uniformed Yanks running to the rear, and was satisfied their line of dead was lessening by quite a number. As I lay in this position, looking over my right shoulder and to the rear as far as I could see around the tree, I saw one of the play-dead Yanks getting to the rear with a revolver in his hand. He would have passed about 100 feet to my right if he had kept straight forward. I could see he was a private, and I concluded the pistol was taken from some dead or badly wounded officer, and that he had had it for no good purpose. Oh, how I wished for my gun so I could disarm him. The thought had no more struck me when he caught sight of me and turned from his course and made straight for me in a trot. My wish for my gun was multiplied instantly. I felt sure he was going to end my existence. He trotted up to within a few feet of me and raised the pistol, pointing toward my head, but instantly lowered it and gave a low, grunting sneer and trotted on. There was not a word spoken. I suppose he glanced at my wound and either weakened from the sight or thought he would be doing a humane act if he put me out of misery. I judged him to be a foreigner of low caste and not long from his native soil. In our immediate front, while the battle was roaring across the creek, the litter bearers came in sight across an opening. A pair of them with litter had ventured as far as I was, and I, being the first man, was hopeful that I would soon be cared for. They came up and had their litter stretched and lined by my side, and were in the act of helping me get on. From the roar and amount of flying grape and shell, there must have been a new battery coming into action, and I guess I was in luck that I was not on the stretcher and on their shoulders, for I think they would have dropped me. The first round the battery fired scared them, and they did not take time to fold litter, but grabbed it by the same end and were off at speed, and me cursing and calling them all manner of hard names, but it did not stop them. The sight was so ridiculous that I could not help but laughing. My wound was not hurting a particle, but left hip and leg were paralyzed or deadened. I waited a short time, thinking the litter bearers would return, but as they did not, I concluded to make an effort to get to the rear, as the tide of battle might change, and I might be a wounded captive. So I pulled myself up, found that I could stand on the wounded side without pain, and by taking hold of my pants leg with my hand, I found I could slowly move to the rear. I did not go far before a straggler offered help, and I accepted. I rested my left arm on his right shoulder and made fair time by hopping with my right foot and dragging the left. And something less than a half mile to the rear, I crawled in an ambulance and was carted to the field infirmary. Before reaching the ambulance, however, leaning on my helper, there was a courier passing under apparent horse speed. He was about 200 feet away, and to the right front a shell struck them and exploded, and there was a scattering of parts of both man and horse. And I took it to be a percussion shot that exploded when hitting. My man gave me a hard wrench and received a cursing for the same. A short distance further on, I was somewhat amused but cursing mad. Near in front there was a wash, or gully, in the field, and there started a rain of unexploded shell. They were skipping, bouncing, and rolling at a lively rate, passing near on each side of us. My man turned me loose and hid out in the gully, and no words that I had at command could move him until the battery ceased shelling in our direction. Arriving at the infirmary, I was soon stretched out on my pallet, and from appearances, I was not first by quite a number. I lay there until the time, I suppose, was well in the after part of the night, with now and then a man passing, looking after our wants. There struck me at a point in my hip a sensitive feeling which I was satisfied was the dead coming to life, and it was but a short space of time before I was suffering greatly. I felt the place, and by pressing hard I was satisfied. I located the bullet, and I asked one of the boys to hunt a doctor as I was suffering greatly. He did so and said he would come soon. This did not satisfy me, and I asked him to return and insist that I get immediate relief. 3 of them reported promptly. They found me laying on my right side. I put my finger to the point and asked them to cut in and get the bullet out. They gave the wound a hurried inspection and felt at point for the bullet, but said they could find none. I stated the dead condition of the hemp, and when the reaction set in, the point I'd indicated was the first to be sensitive, and I'd pressed hard and had well located the bullet, and I wanted them to cut in and get it out as it was lodged on the hip bone. They hesitated a few seconds and had some words, which I heard, and they were debating the advisability. I broke in by saying, "By doing what I say, you will save my life. Without it, I will die." Without further question, they commenced to cut, and from the way the knife pulled the muscle, I took it to be very dull, and was expressing my views in very forcible terms when one of them remarked, "If you don't hush up, we will leave you." My reply was, "It don't hurt as badly when I'm cursing." They were not long in extracting the bullet, and our division surgeon remarked, "Your chances are good, with proper care, but at first I thought different." I said, "Doc, I don't think I will ever die by a Yankee bullet." He said, "You will get well." I was taken, with a lot of others, to some nearby town or stationed and quartered. My first stop was in a small house. A few of us were put in a room 16 or 18 feet square, and near to my right side was placed the 5th Texas color bearer. He was shot below the knee and through the fleshy part or calf of the leg. In camp near Richmond, after the 7 days' fight, he spoke to me about taking the flag and said there was some who wanted him for color bearer, but he cared nothing for the position, and asked me if I would accept it, and remarked that he thought it would be in better hands with me. My words were, in effect, as follows: "You are mistaken, for I feel I am too cowardly for a flag bearer to risk myself, and I find the oftener I can load and shoot, the better able I am to maintain my honor. In fact, I have said I would never pick up a flag going into battle, for I would not lay down my gun when I thought there was a chance to kill a Yankee." He took the flag, and from what I saw and heard, he always bore it credibly. Now, returning to our pallets, we were not long there before I heard him sign, and at times in a low tone, mourning. I asked him his troubles, and he stated he was going to die, and went on with a statement of his lamentable condition, telling me of dear ones at home, and he so far away, and that he would never see them again. After he got through, I rather made fun of him, and said if I had been wounded no worse than he, I would at least keep on through the fight, and after that I would have good excuse to get to the rear and have a good time, and he ought now to be looking out for some sweet girl to talk to. He said, "Oh, well, that is the way you look at it, but if I had been wounded as badly as you, I would have died on the battlefield." The conversation dropped there, and I gave it but little thought, for my mind was on getting a furlough, and the good time I was planning. After a good night's sleep, I felt considerably refreshed and was ready for breakfast, which was soon served. My boy companion, as I will call him, for his age made him near such, told me that he had slept but little during the night, and from that commenced talking of his lamentable condition as he had before. I let him talk at length, and was satisfied that there was great seriousness on his part. I told him he must cheer up, that he was homesick, and from what I heard, it took a determined will to throw it off, and that a man who could face shot and shell as he had, and at that, knowing he was the center target, had determination enough to not think and talk as he did if he would try. We were that evening taken to other quarters, but separated. My parting feelings were sympathy and pity to see such a dear boy like him suffering so much of mind. In a short time, I heard he was dead, and I suppose the report was correct, as I've not heard of him since.